The morning sun glinted off the azure waters of Harborview Bay, casting dancing reflections through the wide windows of the Lighthouse Cafe. Located in the picturesque coastal town of Port Westerly, Maine, the cafe was a local institution. The scent of fresh pastries and rich coffee mingled with the salty ocean breeze, creating an atmosphere of comfort that drew both tourists and locals alike. Seated at his usual corner table, Mason Reynolds adjusted his perfectly pressed navy suit and checked his smartwatch. He was Westerly Tech's CEO, a formidable presence in the small town where fishing had once been the primary industry before his company's arrival a decade ago. The 43-year-old businessman maintained an immaculate appearance, salt and pepper, hair expertly styled, not a wrinkle in sight, the very picture of calculated perfection. Mason's gaze never strayed far from his 15-year-old son Ethan, who sat by the windows, his wheelchair positioned to face the ocean. The boy's artistic hands sketched furiously in a worn notebook, occasionally looking up to watch seagulls dive into the waves. Despite the challenges of his spinal cord injury, Ethan's eyes held a bright intelligence and sensitivity that often made Mason's chest tighten with a complicated mix of pride and something darker. "More coffee, Mr. Reynolds," Lily Parker approached, with a fresh pot, her warm smile genuine beneath observant eyes. At 26, she was working her way through her psychology master's program at the State University. Her blonde hair typically pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform always paired with unique, handmade earrings. "Please." Mason nodded curtly, sliding his cup toward her. "And perhaps you could check if Ethan needs anything." His tone was polite but carried an undercurrent of something tense, as if each interaction was a business negotiation. "Actually," Lily replied, refilling his cup with practiced precision, "I just spoke with him. Bright kid you've got there. He was telling me about his interest in marine art." Mason's hand froze midway to his coffee cup. "He was discussing his artwork with you?" "Just casually," Lily shrugged. "I mentioned I studied art history before, switching to psychology, and he showed me some of his sketches. They're really impressive." Mason's expression shifted so subtly most would miss it, but Lily caught the momentary flash of alarm. "I see," he said, voice carefully modulated. "Well, he's supposed to be working on his calculus this morning. His tutor expects those problems completed by this afternoon." Before Lily could respond, Mason was already rising, gathering his leather portfolio and moving with purposeful strides toward his son. She observed their interaction from behind. The counter, Mason's hand on Ethan's shoulder, the boy's smile fading, notebook closing. There was something in the teen's posture that shifted, a withdrawal that happened the moment his father approached. 20 minutes later, Mason was guiding Ethan's wheelchair out the door. He paused at the register, sliding across his platinum card and adding a $100 tip to a $30 breakfast bill, an extravagant gesture that somehow felt less like generosity and more like closing a door. "Thank you for your service today, Miss Parker," he said with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Ethan has a demanding academic schedule. I'm sure you understand." After they left, Lily found herself staring at the $100 bill Mason had added to her tip. Something about the interaction left her deeply unsettled. In her 3 years working at the Lighthouse, she'd observed countless family dynamics, tourists on vacation, locals in their daily routines. But something about the Reynolds pair struck a chord with her professional intuition. "That's the third time this month Reynolds has whisked that kid away the minute he starts talking to anyone," commented Hank, the 60-something owner of the cafe, wiping down the counter beside her. Born and raised in Port Westerly, Hank knew everyone's business and had watched the town transform when Westerly Tech moved in. Before the accident, that boy was a regular chatterbox. Now he's like a ghost. "What accident?" Lily asked, her interest piqued both personally and professionally. Hank lowered his voice. "About 3 years back. Nobody knows exactly what happened. The official story was that his mother was driving, lost control on Cliffside Road during a storm. Car went partway over the guardrail. Mother walked away without a scratch, but the boy's been in that wheelchair ever since. She left town right after, some say from guilt, others say Mason pushed her out. Either way, he's had that boy on lockdown ever since. Lily's mind, trained through years of psychology courses, began connecting dots. The controlling behavior, Ethan's withdrawn demeanor around his father, Mason's excessive tipping, all potential indicators of a complicated dynamic built around trauma and guilt. As summer tourists streamed into the cafe, Lily tucked these observations away. She couldn't help but notice the portfolio Ethan had left behind in their hasty departure. Inside were drawings of the ocean, not just any ocean scenes, but specifically views from Cliffside Road's notorious curve, where accidents happened with unfortunate regularity. Each sketch captured the same spot from different angles, almost obsessively rendered, as if the artist was trying to solve a puzzle through repetition. Later that afternoon, when the Reynolds driver came to retrieve the forgotten portfolio, Lily took a chance. "I hope Ethan continues his art," she said casually. "He has a remarkable eye for detail." The driver, an older man named Walter, who occasionally came in for coffee, hesitated. "Between you and me, miss, that boy's got talent that's going to waste. Mr. Reynolds has his life planned out. Westerly Tech engineering following in Dad's footsteps. Doesn't matter what the kid wants." "And what does Ethan want?" Lily asked. Walter glanced over his shoulder, lowering his voice. "Freedom, miss. Just like any other teenager. But after what happened, well, Mr. Reynolds thinks keeping him in a cage is the same as keeping him safe." As Walter left, Lily's phone buzzed with a notification from her university. A guest lecturer was coming next week, Dr. Eleanor Winters, a renowned trauma specialist who had worked with numerous high-profile cases in New England. The name tugged at some distant memory in Lily's mind, but she couldn't quite place it. What she didn't know then was how this seemingly mundane morning would set in motion events that would unravel the carefully constructed facade of Port Westerly's most powerful resident and potentially free a young artist from chains that weren't of his own making. The annual Harbour Festival transformed Port Westerly into a kaleidoscope of colours and sounds. Fishing boats decorated with streamers lined the docks, local artisans displayed their crafts in white tents along the boardwalk, and the aroma of fried clams and lobster rolls wafted through the air. For one weekend each July, the entire town celebrated its maritime heritage, a tradition that predated Westerly Tech's arrival by centuries. Lily moved through the crowd, enjoying her rare Saturday off. Her conversation with Ethan at the cafe 2 weeks ago had stayed with her, particularly the way his eyes had lit up when discussing art schools on the West Coast, dreams he swiftly tucked away when his father approached. "Lily, over here!" Her roommate Zoe waved from a booth selling handcrafted jewelry. A fellow psychology student, Zoe had been fascinated by Lily's observations about the Reynolds family. "Did you see who's here?" She nodded toward the waterfront, stage where Mayor Thompson was giving his annual speech. Standing just off to the side, looking simultaneously part of and separate from the community, was Mason Reynolds. His casual attire, designer jeans and a blue button-down with rolled sleeves, was clearly an attempt to blend in, though the Rolex on his wrist betrayed his status. Unlike the relaxed festival-goers around him, Mason's posture remained rigid, his attention focused entirely on the large donation check he would soon present to the town's educational foundation. What caught Lily's attention, however, was the absence of Ethan. In the 3 years since she'd worked at the lighthouse, Mason had never attended a public event without his son. "I heard he's got the kid at some intensive physical therapy program in Portland this weekend," Zoe commented, reading Lily's thoughts. "Supposedly revolutionary treatments, but requires complete focus, no distractions." The mayor's voice boomed over the speakers. "And now, I'd like to welcome our town's greatest benefactor, whose contributions have revitalized Port Westerly's economy and whose latest donation will fund our school's new STEM laboratory." As Mason took the stage with his practiced smile, Lily's gaze drifted toward the harbor. A familiar figure caught her eye. Ethan, his wheelchair positioned at the end of the less crowded fishing pier, accompanied by an elderly man Lily recognized as Walter, the Reynolds driver. "I need to check something," Lily murmured to Zoe, slipping away through the crowd. By the time she reached the pier, Ethan was alone. Walter had apparently stepped away, perhaps to get food from one of the nearby vendors. The boy was sketching intensely, his face reflecting a freedom and concentration Lily had never seen when his father was present. "That's beautiful," she said quietly, approaching so as not to startle him. "The way you've captured the light on the water." Ethan's head snapped up, eyes wide with momentary alarm before recognition settled in. "Lily, right? From the lighthouse?" His voice carried the careful politeness of someone accustomed to measured interactions, but beneath it lay a teenager's natural warmth. "Mind if I join you?" At his nod, she sat on the wooden bench beside his wheelchair. "I thought you were at therapy in Portland today." A flush crept up Ethan's neck. "That's what Dad thinks. Walter's been covering for me. Sometimes I just need—" His gesture encompassed the festival, the ocean, the world beyond his controlled existence. "To breathe," Lily finished. He nodded, returning to his sketch with swift, confident strokes. "I have about 20 minutes before Walter brings me back." To the car. Dad's speech usually runs long. He loves hearing himself talk about his contributions to the community. There was no teenage sarcasm in his tone, just a matter-of-fact observation from someone who had spent years studying the patterns of his keeper. "You're really talented," Lily said, genuinely impressed by the drawing taking shape. The festival. Viewed from a distance, tiny figures celebrating against the vastness of the ocean. "Have you ever shown your work publicly?" Ethan laughed softly. Dad would never allow it. Art is an acceptable hobby but not a viable future for the Reynolds heir. His impression of his father's authoritative tone was unnervingly accurate. "Besides, most of what I draw these days is personal." He hesitated, then slowly turned to another page in his sketchbook. The drawing showed a familiar curve of road on the cliffside overlooking the bay. Rendered with such precision, it could only come from a memory etched deep into consciousness. "The accident," Lily said quietly. Ethan's fingers traced the edge of the guardrail in his drawing. "I keep trying to remember exactly what happened that day. Dad says Mom was driving recklessly because she was upset after their argument, that she wasn't paying attention to the road." His voice dropped. "But that's not how I remember it." Before he could continue, a commotion from the festival drew their attention. Mason Reynolds was making his way through the crowd, Walter at his side looking ashen-faced. The driver had clearly been forced to reveal Ethan's whereabouts. "We need to go," Ethan said urgently, closing his sketchbook. Fear flickered across his face. Not the fear of punishment, Lily noted clinically, but something deeper. The fear of disappointment, of failing to meet impossible expectations. "Ethan!" Mason's voice carried across the pier as he approached. His public smile vanished, replaced by tight-lipped concern. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting after therapy." "I felt better, Dad. Walter thought some fresh air might—" "Walter is not qualified to make medical decisions," Mason cut him off, his tone controlled but ice-cold. His gaze shifted to Lily, recognition dawning. "Miss Parker, what a coincidence finding you here with my son." "We bumped into each other," Lily replied calmly. "Ethan was showing me his artwork. He has extraordinary talent." Something dangerous flashed in Mason's eyes. "My son's educational development is carefully structured to accommodate his condition. Art has its place, but his scientific aptitude is where his future lies." He moved behind the wheelchair, taking control. "We need to get you home. You've overexerted yourself." "I'm fine, Dad," Ethan protested, a rare defiance creeping into his voice. "I was just talking about art programs with Lily. She thinks I could—" "Miss Parker is a waitress, not an educational consultant," Mason said dismissively, though his eyes remained sharp, assessing. "No offense intended." "Actually, I'm completing my master's in clinical psychology," Lily responded, meeting his gaze steadily, "with a focus on trauma and family systems." The words landed like stones in still water. Mason's grip on the wheelchair handles tightened visibly. "How interesting," he said finally. "Perhaps you should focus on your studies rather than inserting yourself into private family matters." As he turned Ethan's wheelchair to leave, the boy looked back at Lily, something desperate and pleading in his expression. He mouthed 2 words. That sent a chill down her spine. Find Mum. By Monday morning, rumors circulated through Port Westerly about Mason Reynolds' uncharacteristic loss of composure at the festival. Some claimed he'd threatened to fire Walter on the spot. Others whispered that he'd been seen arguing with Mayor Thompson about unspecified security concerns regarding the town's upcoming events. When Lily arrived for her morning shift at the lighthouse, Hank pulled her aside, his weathered face grave. Got a call from Reynolds' office this morning. You've been added to their do not serve list. Can they do that? Hank shrugged apologetically. When someone owns half the commercial real estate in town, including the building this cafe leases, yeah, they can. Whatever you did, you got under his skin, girl. Lily's phone buzzed with an email notification from her university advisor. The subject line made her breath catch. Assistantship opportunity. Dr. Eleanor Winter's trauma research. The name clicked into place in her memory. Dr. Winters had been mentioned in an old news clipping about the Reynolds accident. The psychologist called in to evaluate Ethan afterward. Coincidence or something more deliberate? As she read the email offering her a coveted research position, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that Mason Reynolds had just made his first major tactical error, bringing the battle to her home territory of the mind. Autumn painted Port Westerly in fiery hues as summer tourists dwindled and the town settled into its off-season rhythm. Leaves skittered across the boardwalk, where just weeks before, the Harbour Festival had brought the community together and, inadvertently set in motion, a quiet battle of wills between Mason Reynolds and the persistent barista who had taken an interest in his son. You're sure about this? Dr. Eleanor Winters peered at Lily over reading glasses, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a sophisticated twist. Her office at the university was warmly lit, walls lined with psychology texts and framed credentials. Mason Reynolds is a powerful man, and you're alleging some serious concerns based on limited observations. Lily sat straighter in her chair. I'm not alleging anything, Dr. Winters. I'm sharing professional observations as your research assistant. The dynamic between father and son displays classic signs of trauma bonding and excessive control following a significant traumatic event. Dr. Winters removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. At 58, she had built her reputation on groundbreaking work with family trauma systems, particularly those involving power imbalances. And you believe this is connected to the accident 3 years ago. I believe there's more to that story than the official version, Lily replied carefully. Ethan's art fixates on the accident scene from multiple perspectives, almost as if he's trying to reconcile conflicting narratives. Many trauma survivors use art as a processing tool, Dr. Winters noted. It's not unusual. What is unusual is the lengths his father goes to isolate him from normal social interaction. And there's something Ethan said at the festival. Lily hesitated. He said his memories of the accident don't match what his father tells him happened. Dr. Winters' expression shifted subtly. Memory can be unreliable, especially childhood trauma memory. Or sometimes it's the adults who revise history, Lily countered. A charged silence filled the office before Dr. Winters sighed. I can't discuss any previous professional contact I might have had with the Reynolds family, but hypothetically speaking, when wealthy, powerful individuals are involved in traumatic events, the narrative often gets managed. She rose, walking to her window that overlooked the campus quad, where students hurried between classes, bundled against the October chill. The Adolescent Trauma Processing Group meets Thursday evenings at the community center. As my assistant, you'd be expected to help facilitate. Participation is anonymous and confidential. Lily understood the unspoken message. If Ethan attended, any observations would be protected under therapeutic confidentiality. I'll prepare the materials, Lily said, rising to leave. Dr. Winters' voice stopped her at the door. Lily, be careful. Good intentions without proper boundaries can sometimes cause more harm than good. The Port Westerly Community Center stood on reclaimed waterfront property, a modern building funded primarily by Westerly Tech, a fact prominently displayed on the dedication plaque bearing Mason Reynolds' name. Every Thursday evening, the East Wing hosted support groups for various community needs, from addiction recovery to grief counseling. Lily arranged chairs in a circle, placing art supplies on a central table. Dr. Winters reviewed her session notes nearby. As participants began filtering in, Lily fought to keep her expression neutral when Walter entered, pushing Ethan's wheelchair. The driver gave a slight nod of recognition before addressing Dr. Winters. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to deliver this consent form and remain in the building during the session." He handed over an envelope. He also requested that Ethan's participation remain confidential due to privacy concerns. After Walter retreated to the waiting area, Dr. Winters began the session with 6 teenagers, each facing different physical challenges. Ethan remained quiet initially, eyes downcast except for occasional furtive glances at Lily. When the art therapy portion began, he selected charcoals and worked intensely, shoulders hunched protectively over his drawing. "Would anyone like to share their work, Doctor?" Winters asked after 30 minutes. To Lily's surprise, Ethan raised his hand slightly. "Mine isn't finished, but..." He turned his paper, revealing a stark black and white rendering of a car teetering on a cliff edge, viewed from inside the vehicle. The perspective was disorienting, the dashboard and windshield visible, but the world beyond tilted at an impossible angle. "This is how I remember it," he said quietly. "Dad always says Mom was driving, that she was upset and not paying attention, but I was sitting behind her. I remember her hands on the wheel, knuckles white, and Dad reaching over from the passenger seat." He stopped abruptly, glancing toward the door as if expecting interruption. "What do you feel when you look at this image?" Dr. Winters prompted gently. Ethan considered the question. "Confusion. Dad's built this whole story about Mom being unstable, being responsible. He's told it so many times I sometimes believe it myself. But then I draw, and different memories surface." His fingers traced the edge of the paper. "Sometimes I dream about Mom coming back to tell her side, but Dad made sure that would never happen." Later, as the group dispersed, Ethan lingered, waiting until the others had left before approaching Lily. "I've been coming to the lighthouse early mornings when Dad has breakfast meetings," he said quietly. "The new manager doesn't recognize me. I've been researching my mom, Catherine Reynolds. She didn't just leave town, she was made to leave. Walter helped me access Dad's old emails. There was a settlement, a non-disclosure agreement." Lily glanced toward the door where Walter waited. "Should you be telling me this?" "Walter's on my side," Ethan whispered. "He's worked for our family since before I was born. He knows what really happened." He pressed a folded paper into her hand. "This is her last known address in Seattle. If anyone can verify my memories, it's her." Before Lily could respond, Walter appeared, his expression carefully neutral. "Time to go home, Ethan. Your father will be calling to check in soon." As they left, Lily unfolded the paper to find not just an address, but a phone number with a Seattle area code. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked it into her pocket. The boundary between professional involvement and personal crusade was becoming dangerously blurred. The next morning, the sleepy tranquility of the Lighthouse Cafe was shattered when Mason Reynolds strode in, bypassing the line of customers, waiting to order. His tailored overcoat and the dark circles under his eyes suggested a man running on fury and minimal sleep. "Where is she?" he demanded of the startled manager. "Sir, I'm not sure who..." "Lily Parker. I know she works mornings." From the kitchen doorway, Lily emerged, untying her apron. "I'm here, Mr. Reynolds." Mason's gaze locked onto her, jaw tight with controlled rage. "Outside now!" In the alley behind the cafe, autumn wind whipped between buildings as Mason confronted her. "What exactly do you think you're doing with my son?" "My job as a clinical psychology student," Lily replied evenly, "assisting with a therapeutic support group." "Don't play games," Mason snapped. "Ethan came home asking questions about his mother last night, questions he's never asked before. Questions about the accident that exactly mirror the artistic expression therapy from your session." Lily maintained her composure. "Children process trauma at their own pace, Mr. Reynolds. Perhaps Ethan is finally ready to address his memories." "Memories are malleable, Miss Parker, especially a child's. Whatever agenda you have, whatever amateur psychological theories you're testing on my son, it stops now." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Did it ever occur to you that there might be valid reasons I've protected Ethan from certain truths? That a 15-year-old boy with a life-altering injury might not be equipped to handle the full reality of how it happened?" For a brief moment, Lily glimpsed something beyond anger in his expression, genuine fear, perhaps even desperation. It humanized him in a way that gave her pause. "I've invested everything in giving my son stability and security," Mason continued, regaining his composure. "His rehabilitation, his education, his future, all carefully planned to maximize his potential despite his limitations." "And what about his mother?" Lily asked quietly. "Doesn't he deserve to know her side?" Mason's expression hardened. "Catherine forfeited any right to shape our son's understanding when she signed those papers and took that settlement. There are consequences to choices, Miss Parker. Remember that before you continue down this path." As he turned to leave, Lily called after him, "Consequences like rumors about Westerly Tech's financial practices." Mason froze, turning slowly. "Excuse me?" "There's talk in town. Questions about company finances, about pressure on the mayor to approve certain zoning changes without proper environmental impact studies." Lily hadn't planned to mention the whispers she'd heard at the university, but his threat had triggered a protective instinct. "I imagine such rumors could be damaging, especially with potential investors visiting next month." Something shifted in Mason's calculated expression, a recognition that he wasn't the only one capable of leveraging pressure points. "Be very careful, Miss Parker," he said finally. "You're playing a game you don't understand, with stakes you can't imagine." Later that evening, Lily sat in her apartment staring at her phone, the Seattle number on the screen. Her finger hovered over the call button as Zoe watched with concern. "Are you sure about this?" her roommate asked. "Calling his ex-wife seems like crossing a major line." Lily thought about Ethan's desperate expression, about Mason's barely concealed panic, about Dr. Winter's careful non-answers regarding her past involvement with the family. "I'm not sure about anything anymore," she admitted, "except that somewhere in this mess is a teenager who deserves to know the truth." She pressed call, her heart pounding as the line connected, and a woman's voice answered with cautious curiosity. "Hello? Is this Catherine Reynolds?" Lily asked. Pause, then. "No one has called me that in years. Who is this?" "My name is Lily Parker. I'm calling about your son, Ethan." Winter descended on Port Westerly with an uncharacteristic ferocity, as if mirroring the emotional turbulence brewing beneath the town's serene surface. Snow blanketed the harbor, fishing boats sat idle with ice crusting their hulls, and the lighthouse cafe served as a haven for locals seeking warmth against the biting coastal winds. Lily stared out the cafe window at the gray December sky, the phone conversation from 2 weeks ago still echoing in her mind. Catherine Reynolds, now Catherine Mercer, had initially been shocked into silence at the mention of her son's name. Then came the tears, the halting questions about Ethan's well-being, his progress, his happiness. Not once did she ask about Mason. "I never abandoned him," Catherine had insisted, her voice breaking. Mason's lawyers made it clear. If I fought for custody, they'd drag Ethan through psychological evaluations, depositions, years of legal battles. With his injury, his recovery, I couldn't put him through that. The settlement wasn't to buy my silence, it was to buy Ethan's peace. When Lily had mentioned Ethan's drawings of the accident, the lengthy pause on the line spoke volumes before Catherine finally responded. "Mason wasn't just a passenger that day. We were arguing about his plans to move Ethan to a boarding school. Mason grabbed the wheel. I don't think he meant for us to crash, but his actions..." Now replaying that conversation, Lily felt the weight of knowledge pressing down on her shoulders. If Catherine's version was true, Mason had fabricated an entirely false narrative about the accident, gaslighting his own son into questioning his memories. Yet something about Mason's desperate protection of Ethan suggested his motives, however, misguided, stemmed from more than just covering his culpability. "Earth to Lily," Zoe snapped her fingers, sliding into the seat opposite. "You've been staring at that same spot for 10 minutes. Coffee's getting cold." Lily blinked, returning to the present. "Sorry, just thinking." "About your psychological crusade?" Zoe's tone carried both concern and skepticism. "You've missed 2 study sessions this week. Professor Harris asked if everything was okay." "I've been meeting with Dr. Winters," Lily replied defensively. "It's related to my thesis." Zoe stirred her latte. "And the fact that you were parked outside Reynolds' estate yesterday? Also thesis research?" Lily flushed. She had driven to the gated property on the outskirts of town, hoping to glimpse Ethan. Since their encounter at the support group, he hadn't returned for follow-up sessions. Walter had called Dr. Winters to explain that Mason had arranged for private therapy instead. "I'm worried about him," Lily admitted. "Catherine said she's tried contacting him for years. Letters, emails, even through his school. Nothing ever gets through Mason's screening." "And you think you'll accomplish what his own mother couldn't?" Zoe shook her head. "Lily, I love you. But you're developing an unhealthy fixation. This isn't just about helping a kid anymore, it's becoming personal." Before Lily could respond, the cafe door swung open, bringing with it a flurry of snowflakes and Walter's stooped figure. The driver scanned the room, relief washing over his weathered face when he spotted Lily. He approached their table, removing his cap. "Miss Parker, might I have a word? It's urgent." Zoe raised an eyebrow, but gathered her things. "I'll see you at home," she said, squeezing Lily's shoulder as she left. Walter slid into the vacant seat, his hands trembling slightly as he placed a small USB drive on the table. "Ethan wanted you to have this. His father, Mr. Reynolds, isn't well, hasn't been sleeping, spends nights pacing, reviewing security footage, making calls." "Is Ethan okay?" Lily asked, concern sharpening her voice. "Physically, yes, but he's become withdrawn after you contacted his mother." "How did you know about that?" Walter's gaze was steady. "Catherine called the house. I intercepted it, thankfully, but she mentioned you by name. Ethan overheard enough to piece things together." He pushed the USB drive toward her. "This contains security footage from the house. Ethan managed to download it before his father restricted his computer access. He said you'd understand its significance." "Walter, what's really happening in that house?" The old driver's eyes clouded. "I've served the Reynolds family for 30 years, watched Mason grow from a determined young man into whatever he's become, watched him push away Catherine, who loved him despite his flaws. Now I'm watching him destroy his relationship with Ethan through the same controlling behavior." He stood slowly. "I've enabled too much for too long out of misguided loyalty. Perhaps this is my attempt at atonement." After Walter left, Lily held the USB drive, feeling its weight beyond its physical presence. That evening, in her apartment with the doors locked and curtains drawn, she connected it to her laptop. The footage showed multiple angles of the Reynolds estate: hallways, the study, the kitchen, Ethan's bedroom. Most clips were mundane: housekeepers cleaning, Ethan doing homework, Mason on business calls. But one video, date-stamped 3 nights, prior, showed Mason stumbling into his study at 2 a.m., clearly sleep-deprived, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. He opened a hidden wall safe behind a painting and removed a thick file labeled "Cliffside Accident, Confidential." As he spread the documents across his desk, the camera captured clear images of medical reports, legal agreements, and police statements. Mason stared at a particular photograph. The wrecked car balanced precariously on the cliff edge and suddenly broke down, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. He whispered something the microphone barely caught. "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." The most disturbing footage came from Ethan's room. Multiple cameras monitored him from different angles, capturing his every move. One clip showed Ethan sketching late at night, then carefully hiding his artwork beneath a loose floorboard when he heard footsteps approaching. Another showed Mason entering while Ethan slept, standing over his son's bed with an expression of such raw anguish it was difficult to reconcile with the controlled businessman Port Westerly knew. The final video was the most recent. Mason pacing in his study, phone to his ear. "I don't care what it costs," he snapped. "Find everything on Lily Parker. Academic records, financial history, family connections. I want to know why she's interfering and who's backing her." A pause. "No, I haven't told Ethan his mother called. And I won't. Catherine forfeited that right when she—" He stopped abruptly. "Just do what I'm paying you for. I've worked too hard to keep this family together to let some amateur psychologist destroy everything." Lily closed the laptop, her hands trembling. The man on those videos wasn't simply a controlling father. He was someone unraveling under the weight of guilt and fear. His obsessive monitoring of Ethan went beyond protection into something pathological. She reached for her phone to call Dr. Winters, but hesitated. The ethics of her involvement had become increasingly murky. She'd contacted Ethan's mother, viewed private security footage, and was now in possession of evidence that could potentially be used against Mason. As a psychology student, she understood the dangers of amateur intervention in complex trauma situations. Yet as she stared at the dark laptop screen, she couldn't shake the image of Ethan's desperate eyes at the Harbour Festival, silently pleading for help. The Port Westerly Winter Festival transformed the town square into a snow-covered wonderland. Despite the biting cold, locals gathered around bonfires, sipping hot cider and celebrating the traditional fisherman's blessing ceremony that dated back to the town's founding. Colored lights sparkled in the trees as children built snowmen and vendors sold handcrafted ornaments. Lily wandered through the festivities, her mind elsewhere until a familiar voice called her name. She turned to find Dr. Winters approaching, elegant in a camel-colored coat. "I thought I might find you here," the older woman said. "You've missed our last 2 meetings. I'm sorry things have been complicated." Dr. Winters guided her toward a quieter area near the harbor viewpoint. "Mason Reynolds came to my office yesterday. He's requested that I reconsider your assistantship on ethical grounds." Lily's heart sank. "What did you tell him?" "That my selection of research assistants is not up for discussion." Dr. Winters' gaze was penetrating. "But privately, Lily, I have concerns. You've become emotionally invested in the Reynolds case in ways that cross professional boundaries." "It's not a case. It's a boy who needs help," Lily countered. "Did you know Mason has cameras monitoring Ethan's every move? That he's manipulated his son's memories of the accident? That he's actively preventing contact with his mother?" Dr. Winters sighed. "What I know is that trauma creates complex family systems. What appears controlling from the outside might be desperate protection from someone who doesn't know how else to cope." She paused. "Before you judge Mason too harshly, you should know the full story." "Which is?" "I can't break confidentiality, but I can tell you that Mason Reynolds carries guilt far beyond what you've surmised." Dr. Winters looked out at the dark ocean. "Sometimes, Lily, the most damaging lies we tell are the ones we believe protect those we love." As they stood in silence, Lily spotted a familiar wheelchair across the square. Ethan, bundled against the cold, watched the ice sculpture competition while Walter hovered nearby. Without his father present, the boy seemed more relaxed, smiling as he spoke with an elderly man Lily recognized from the support group. "That's Benjamin Morris," Dr. Winters noted, following her gaze. "Former art professor. He's become something of a mentor to Ethan these past weeks." Lily watched as the older man showed Ethan a small sketchbook, the boy's face lighting up as he examined the drawings. "Mason allows this." "Interesting development, isn't it?" Dr. Winters replied. "After our conversation about healthy boundaries and age-appropriate independence, Mason agreed to let Ethan attend art classes with Benjamin twice weekly. Small steps." Before Lily could respond, commotion erupted near the festival entrance. Mason Reynolds had arrived, moving purposefully through the crowd with uncharacteristic dishevelment. His tie was askew, coat unbuttoned despite the cold, and he scanned the festival with frantic energy. When he spotted Ethan, relief washed over his face, quickly replaced by his typical controlled expression as he approached his son. But something was different in their interaction. Mason knelt beside the wheelchair, speaking quietly, rather than hovering dominantly behind it. Ethan's response appeared cautious, but not fearful. Another interesting development, Dr. Winters murmured. Mason called me yesterday morning requesting an emergency session. We spoke for 3 hours. About what? Again, confidentiality, but I believe he's finally confronting some difficult truths. She touched Lily's arm. Which brings me to why I sought you out tonight. The Reynolds situation is more volatile than you realize. Mason has discovered your contact with Catherine. Lily tensed. How? Catherine called the house again. This time Mason answered. A chill ran through Lily that had nothing to do with the winter air. What happened? They spoke for over an hour. First confrontation they've had since the settlement. Dr. Winters watched as Mason helped Ethan navigate toward the bonfire area. Catherine is flying in tomorrow. She's coming here? To Port Westerly? Lily couldn't hide her shock. Mason invited her. Dr. Winters turned to face her fully. Which is why I need you to step back, Lily. Whatever catalyst your intervention provided has started a process that needs professional guidance. This family is beginning a delicate reconciliation with their trauma. Your continued involvement could complicate an already volatile situation. Across the square, Ethan looked up from his conversation with Benjamin and spotted Lily. He gave a small wave, his expression a mix of gratitude and something like hope. Mason followed his son's gaze, his eyes meeting Lily's across the distance. To her surprise, he gave a slight, acknowledging nod. You've done what you set out to do, Dr. Winters said gently. You recognized a family in crisis and pushed for intervention. Now let the professionals and the family themselves do the healing work. Lily wanted to argue, to insist on seeing this through, but the rational part of her brain, the part that had spent years studying the ethics of therapeutic boundaries, knew Dr. Winters was right. Her involvement had become personal in ways that could potentially harm rather than help. I understand, she said finally, but I need to know he'll be okay. Dr. Winters smiled sadly. Healing isn't linear, Lily. There are no guarantees. But recognizing the problem is always the first step toward recovery. Mason has taken that step. As they spoke, Lily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for finding my mum. Dad's finally talking about what really happened. Ethan. Looking up, she saw the boy tucking away his phone as Walter pushed his wheelchair toward the harbor overlook, where Port Westerly's traditional lantern release would soon begin. Mason followed a few steps behind, his usual rigid posture noticeably absent. Sometimes, Dr. Winters observed, the most important part of helping isn't in doing more, but in knowing when to step aside. The winter festival continued around them, families launching paper lanterns into the night sky above the harbor, lights of hope rising into darkness, carrying wishes for the coming year. Among them, Lily spotted the Reynolds family, Ethan holding a lantern while Mason steadied it, father and son working together to send their light soaring over the troubled waters below. The first fragile crocuses of March pushed through melting snow along Port Westerly's harbor walk, their purple and yellow blooms defiant against winter's lingering chill. Spring arrived tentatively to the coastal town, bringing with it longer days, warming breezes, and the gradual return of fishing boats to their full operations. For Lily, immersed in her final semester coursework, the changing season marked nearly 3 months since she had stepped back from the Reynolds family situation. She had honored Dr. Winters' request, maintaining her distance despite occasional glimpses of Ethan and Mason around town. Through campus grapevine and careful observations during her shifts at the lighthouse, she had pieced together fragments of their ongoing story. Catherine had indeed returned to Port Westerly in December, staying at the Harbourfront Hotel for nearly 2 weeks. Ethan now attended the local high school's art program 3 afternoons a week, transported by Walter rather than private tutors. Most significantly, Mason had stepped back from daily operations at Westerly Tech, citing a desire to focus on family matters, a move that sparked speculation throughout the business community. 1 cappuccino and blueberry scone, Lily announced, setting the order on the table where Zoe was surrounded by textbooks. You look stressed. Final clinical practicum presentations next week, her roommate groaned. "Hey, isn't that your psychological pet project?" Lily followed Zoe's gaze to the cafe entrance, where Ethan wheeled himself in, accompanied not by Walter or Mason, but by an elegant woman in her early 40s. Catherine Reynolds, no, Catherine Mercer now, had the same artistic sensitivity evident in her son's features, though her blonde hair and willowy frame contrasted with Ethan's darker, coloring inherited from his father. "They're still in town?" Lily murmured, surprised. Last she'd heard, Catherine had returned to Seattle weeks ago. "Should we say hello?" Zoe asked. "No," Lily replied quickly. "Professional boundaries, remember?" Nevertheless, as she returned to the counter, Ethan spotted her and whispered something to his mother. Catherine looked up, studying Lily with open curiosity, before nodding to her son. As Lily busied herself with coffee orders, Ethan approached the counter, his wheelchair navigating the cafe with practiced ease. "Lily," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered, more confident. "Got a minute?" "I'm working, but..." She glanced at her manager, who nodded permission. 5 minutes. They moved to a quiet corner near the window. Outside, spring sunshine sparkled on the harbor waters, fishing boats preparing for the day's catch. "You look well," Lily offered. It was true. The haunted look had faded from Ethan's eyes, replaced by something steadier, more present. "I am." "Better anyway." He fidgeted with the leather bracelet on his wrist, new handmade, nothing like the expensive designer clothes Mason had always dressed him in. "I wanted to thank you. What you did, getting my mom to come back. It changed everything. I heard she returned to Seattle." "She did, but she's back now for the spring festival." He glanced at his mother, who was deliberately giving them space while pretending to study the menu. "She's moving here permanently next month. Got a job? Teaching art therapy at the community college." "That's wonderful," Lily said genuinely. "And your father?" Ethan's expression grew more complex. "Still working through things. He's seeing Dr. Winters twice weekly. We have family sessions too." He hesitated. The truth about the accident, it wasn't what anyone thought. Not completely. Lily maintained her professional composure, despite burning curiosity. "You don't have to share that with me, Ethan." "I know, but I want to." He leaned forward. "Dad always blamed Mom, told everyone she was driving carelessly, that she'd put me in danger, and Mom let herself believe she was at fault because she'd been arguing with him while driving. But nobody remembered the whole truth, not until we all started talking." He took a deep breath. "There was a deer on the road. Mom swerved to avoid it. Dad grabbed the wheel instinctively, thinking she was losing control. They both contributed to what happened, but neither one deliberately caused it. Just a terrible accident that everyone tried to blame someone for." The simplicity of this truth, after all the complex narratives and guilt-ridden manipulations, struck Lily with its poignancy. That must have been powerful to finally understand. "It changed everything," Ethan confirmed. "Once Dad admitted his part in it, and that he'd twisted the story to push Mom away because he couldn't face his own guilt, we could actually start dealing with what happened instead of the stories we'd created about it." From across the cafe, Catherine caught Lily's eye and mouthed a simple, "Thank you." "How's the art going?" Lily asked. Ethan's face brightened. "I got accepted to a summer program at the Rhode Island School of Design, pre-college course for high school students." Pride radiated from him. "Dad's renting an apartment in Providence so we can stay the whole summer. He's taking a sabbatical from Westerly Tech." Their conversation was interrupted as the cafe door swung open and Mason Reynolds entered. 3. Months had softened the hard edges of his appearance. His suit was less rigid, hair slightly longer, expression less guarded. He spotted his ex-wife and son immediately, a flicker of old tension crossing his face, before being replaced by what appeared to be practiced acceptance. When he noticed Lily, he paused before approaching their table. "Miss Parker," he acknowledged with a nod. The cold hostility had vanished from his tone, replaced by something more complex, grudging respect perhaps. "Mr. Reynolds," she replied evenly. An awkward silence stretched between them until Mason broke it. "Ethan, your mother's wondering if you're ready for your studio session with Professor Morris." "Coming, Dad." Ethan gave Lily's hand a quick squeeze. Thanks again for everything." As Ethan rejoined his mother, Mason lingered. "Dr. Winters speaks highly of your professional instincts," he said finally, "though your methods were unorthodox." "Professional boundaries are important," Lily acknowledged. "I crossed some lines." "Yes." Mason's gaze drifted to his son, now laughing with Catherine by the door. "But sometimes lines need crossing when systems fail." He reached into his jacket, removing an envelope. "The Port Westerly Memorial Scholarship Committee asked me to deliver this. You've been awarded the Graduate Fellowship for next year. Full funding for your clinical psychology doctorate." Lily accepted the envelope with surprise. "I didn't apply for this. Dr. Winters nominated you." The committee agreed unanimously. Something almost like a genuine smile touched Mason's lips. "Port Westerly needs more mental health professionals with your persistence." He extended his hand, a gesture so unexpected. Lily momentarily stared before accepting the handshake. His grip was firm but no longer domineering. "We're heading to Cliffside Point," he said, his voice quieter. "Ethan's idea. First time we've been back since. Well, Catherine and I thought it might help with closure. Dr. Winters is meeting us there." The significance of this pilgrimage wasn't lost on Lily. Cliffside Point, the scene of the accident, the source of 3 years of trauma, manipulation, and fractured relationships, had become a place of potential healing. "I hope it brings some peace," she offered. Mason nodded, glancing again at his son. "He's applying to art schools, did he tell you? Nothing like the future I'd planned for him." A complicated emotion crossed his face. "But it's his life to live, not mine to control. I'm learning that." Belatedly. With a final nod, he joined Catherine and Ethan at the door. As they left, Lily caught a glimpse of the Reynolds family, not whole again, not erased of their trauma, but moving forward with a hard-won honesty that might eventually lead to genuine healing. Farte, the annual Spring Flower Festival, transformed Port Westerly's town square into a riot of color. Cherry blossoms lined the streets, daffodils and tulips filled planters, and local florists competed for the most elaborate displays. Traditionally, marking the end of winter's isolation and the return to community life, this year's festival seemed especially significant to Lily as she wandered among the stalls with Zoe and Dr. Winters. "The fellowship committee was impressed with your application materials," Dr. Winters commented, admiring a display of orchids. "Your essay on trauma-informed community intervention strategies was particularly strong." "Thank you for the nomination," Lily replied. "Though I'm still processing the irony that Mason Reynolds will be funding my doctoral studies." Dr. Winters smiled enigmatically. "Mason is a complex man working through his own healing journey. Funding your education is, perhaps, his way of making amends while ensuring the community benefits." They paused at the community center's exhibition space, where local artists displayed their work. At the center of the main wall hung a striking oil painting, Cliffside Point at sunset. The dangerous curve of road transformed into a place of haunting beauty rather than tragedy. The artist had captured the interplay of light on water, the solidity of earth and the freedom of sky, in a composition that somehow conveyed both danger and hope. "Ethan's work has evolved significantly," Dr. Winters observed, "moving from memory processing to something more transcendent." The painting's placard revealed it had already sold for a considerable sum, the proceeds donated to the town's rehabilitation center for patients with spinal injuries. As they continued through the festival, Lily spotted the Reynolds family near the harbor. They no longer presented as a traditional unit. Catherine and Mason maintained a respectful distance, but they functioned with a new authenticity. Ethan moved between his parents with ease, his wheelchair navigating the cobblestone path that the town had finally made accessible after years of Mason's advocating. "Will they be okay?" Lily asked Dr. Winters, watching as Mason helped adjust something on Ethan's wheelchair while Catherine looked on with approval. "Define okay," Dr. Winters replied. "Will they be a conventional family? No. Has the trauma magically disappeared? Certainly not. But are they learning to build something authentic from the wreckage of what was lost? Yes, I believe they are." She squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. "That's the thing about trauma work, my dear. We don't aim for perfect healing or erasing what happened. We aim for integration, helping people weave their difficult experiences into a larger, more honest life narrative. The spring breeze carried the scent of the sea mixed with cherry blossoms, renewal touched with the salt of old tears. In the Eee harbor, fishing boats prepared for the blessing ceremony that would officially open the spring season, their hulls freshly painted, decks scrubbed clean of winter's residue. Integration, Lily repeated, watching as Ethan laughed at something Catherine said, while Mason stood nearby, his posture relaxed in a way she'd never seen before. Not perfect, but authentic. The most any of us can hope for, Dr. Winters agreed. As the festival lanterns were lit against the approaching evening, Lily realized she was witnessing not an ending, but a continuation. The Reynolds family writing a new chapter in their story, one no longer governed by secrets and control, but by the difficult, necessary truth that had finally been allowed into the light. Like Port Westerly itself, with its cycles of storm and calm, they would continue facing challenges, but they would face them differently now, together when possible, apart when necessary, but always with the honesty that had been missing for too long. The tide was turning in this harbor town, bringing with it the promise of spring after the longest winter,